There's a difference between things that look good and things that are good, my sister. Megan has built an entire, glittering career on the first one. I've built my life on the second. Megan's world is one of polished veneers, of carefully curated Instagram feeds, of floral arrangements that cost more than my monthly rent. She's a high-end wedding planner, a creator of flawless, photogenic moments for the rich and fabulous. Her success is measured in magazine spreads and the gushing testimonials of her wealthy clients. It's a success that is loud, shiny, and easy for my family to understand. My world smells of sawdust and linseed oil. My success is quiet. It's in the satisfying whisper of a hand plane over a piece of 1,000-year-old reclaimed oak. It's in the silent, perfect strength of a dovetail joint. It's in the deep, almost spiritual understanding of how a building breathes, how it settles, how it stands the test of time. I'm a historic restoration specialist. I don't create illusions of perfection. I preserve the beauty of things that are real, that are flawed, that have a soul. In my family's eyes, Megan is a visionary artist. I am a glorified construction worker with a niche hobby. If you've ever had a passion that is more about substance than style, and had to justify it to people who only see the surface, you know what I'm talking about. It's a constant, low-grade battle. Hit that like button if you've ever felt like your success was invisible to the people who were supposed to see you most clearly. The story really begins with a phone call, as these things so often do. I was in my workshop, a beautiful, chaotic space in a converted warehouse, covered in a fine layer of sawdust. I was in the middle of restoring a set of massive, hand-carved doors from a 19th century church, a project that required absolute focus. So, when my phone buzzed with Megan's picture on the screen, a picture of her laughing with a glass of champagne, I let it go to voicemail. She called back instantly, a double tap. That was Megan's signal for this is not a request. It is a demand. With a sigh that stirred the sawdust on my workbench, I wiped my hands on my jeans and answered. "Lena, thank God," she said, her voice a frantic, high-pitched whirlwind. "I'm in the middle of a 5-alarm catastrophe, and I need you." "Hello to you too, Megan," I said dryly. "What's the catastrophe? Did the calligrapher use the wrong shade of ivory for the place cards?" "Don't be snarky. I don't have time," she snapped. "This is about the Henderson wedding, you know. The one I've been working on for a year, the biggest event of my career, the wedding that is going to put me on the map." Nationally, I knew all about the Henderson wedding. It had been the sole topic of family conversation for months. A tech billionaire's daughter was getting married, and Megan had landed the contract. The budget was obscene. The guest list was a who's who of the new money elite. For Megan, it was the Super Bowl. "What's the problem?" I asked. "The venue, the Blackwood Barn, the bride, Victoria, has decided, at the last minute, that the main entrance needs a rustic archway, something hand-hewn," she said, "something authentic. And the rehearsal dinner is tomorrow night. I've called everyone. No one can do it on this short notice. And then I thought of you, and your little wood projects." My little wood projects. I was currently in the middle of a commissioned project to restore the entire interior of a historic landmark library, a job that had a budget in the high 6 figures. But to her, it was all just my little wood projects. "Megan, I'm in the middle of a major restoration," I said. "I can't just drop everything to build you a prop." "It's not a prop," she insisted. "It's a feature. And this could be a huge opportunity for you. Lena, think about the people who will see it. Victoria's father could probably fund your little workshop for the rest of your life if he likes it. You should be paying me for this kind of exposure." The sheer, breathtaking arrogance of it was almost impressive. She wasn't asking for a favor. She was presenting me with a gift, the gift of her validation. Before I could politely tell her where she could stick her authentic, hand-hewn archway, another voice joined the call. My mother, Megan, had clearly put me on speakerphone. "Lena, darling," my mother said, her voice full of that weaponized sweetness she was so good at. "It's just a small thing for your sister. You know how much this wedding means to her. This is her real career. Honey, it's so important that we all support her. It's what families do. The guilt trip, right on cue. The familiar 1-2 punch of Megan's condescension and my mother's emotional manipulation. I have my own real career, Mom, I said, my voice tired. Of course you do, dear, she said, in a tone that clearly meant of course you don't. But this is for Megan, please. Lena, for the family. I was about to say no. I was about to stand my ground, but then Megan said the one thing that made my blood run cold. The venue is the Blackwood Barn, she'd said. I froze, my hand tightening on the phone. The Blackwood Barn, I knew that building. I knew it better than almost anyone. Years ago, before some developer had bought it and turned it into a high-end event space. The Blackwood Barn had been just that, an old, historic barn, beautiful and slowly decaying. The County Historical Society had hired me, then a young, unknown specialist, to do a full structural assessment. It was one of my first big solo projects. I had spent a month inside that barn. I had climbed every beam, inspected every joint, analyzed every inch of the foundation. I had fallen in love with its magnificent, old-growth timber frame, the hand-hewn posts and beams that had been put in place by craftsmen 200 years ago. And I had written a very detailed, very specific report. The report praised the beauty and the history of the barn, but it also came with a series of dire warnings. The main, central tie beam, a single, massive piece of oak that spanned the entire width of the structure, showed signs of significant stress fracturing. The foundation on the north side was unstable. I had concluded my report with a very clear recommendation: the barn was a historical treasure, but it was not, under any circumstances, structurally sound enough for public assembly. I had recommended a series of extensive, and very expensive, reinforcements that would be necessary before it could ever be safely used as a venue. The developer who bought it a year later had clearly ignored my report. He had done a cosmetic renovation, sanded the floors, put in some fancy lighting, added a massive commercial kitchen. He had turned it into the beautiful, rustic, and profoundly dangerous wedding venue my sister was about to use. Lena, are you there? Megan's impatient voice snapped me out of my thoughts. My mind was racing. The wedding, hundreds of people, the weight of the decorations, the sound system, the catering equipment, the vibrations from the music, the dancing, all of it putting stress on a structure I knew for a fact was compromised. My decision was no longer about my sister's arrogance or my mother's manipulation. It was now a matter of professional and moral responsibility. I had to get inside that barn. I had to see for myself what they had done to it. Okay, I said, my voice quiet. I'll do it. Oh. Thank God, Megan sighed, a wave of relief washing through her voice. You're a lifesaver. I need it delivered and installed by noon tomorrow, before the rehearsal walkthrough. I have one condition, I said. Anything. You and me, we do a private walkthrough of the venue. Tonight, just the two of us. I need to see the space to get a feel for the aesthetics. It was a plausible lie. Fine, whatever, she said dismissively. Be there at 9, and Lena, try to look presentable. She hung up. I stood there in the sawdust-filled silence of my workshop, my heart pounding with a new, cold dread. This was no longer just a family drama. This was a potential catastrophe. I had been humiliated. I had been condescended to. I had been manipulated. But now, hundreds of lives could be at stake. And I, the failed daughter, the glorified construction worker, was the only person in the world who knew the truth. I looked at the beautiful, half-finished church doors I was working on. The quiet, contemplative work would have to wait. I had a different kind of restoration project now. I had to go and see if I could save my sister's perfect wedding from becoming a perfect disaster. And I had a terrible, sinking feeling that she wasn't going to make it easy. That evening, I pulled up to the Blackwood Barn a few minutes before 9, my old pickup truck rattling to a stop in a parking lot that was already filling up with sleek, black luxury sedans. I was dressed for a professional consultation, not a party. I wore dark, durable work pants, a clean flannel shirt, and my steel-toed boots. I had my mag light on my belt and a leather satchel with my measuring tape, a small level, and a notebook. I was here to assess a space, not to socialize. The moment I stepped out of my truck, I knew I had made a terrible mistake. The barn, which I remembered as a beautiful, rustic, and slightly decaying structure, had been transformed. Thousands of tiny, warm fairy lights were strung around the massive beams. Huge, elegant arrangements of white roses and eucalyptus were everywhere. And through the wide-open barn doors, I could see not an empty space waiting for a consultation, but a full-blown, immaculately catered event. There were at least 100 people inside, all dressed in the kind of casual, expensive elegance that screams rehearsal dinner. The air was filled with the sound of a string quartet and the clinking of champagne glasses. Megan hadn't arranged a private walkthrough. She had tricked me. She had ambushed me, luring me here under a false pretense to ensure I would deliver on her last-minute, impossible demand. It was a classic Megan move, pure, shameless manipulation, all in the service of her own perfect event. For a moment, I considered getting back in my truck and just leaving, but my professional pride, and the cold knot of dread in my gut about the barn's structural integrity, kept me rooted to the spot. I had to get inside. I had to see the beams. I took a deep breath, squared my shoulders, and walked into the lion's den. My work boots feeling like lead weights on the polished stone floor of the entrance. Megan, a vision in a silk jumpsuit the color of champagne, spotted me immediately. Her face, which had been a mask of professional charm as she spoke to a group of guests, broke into a wide, triumphant smile. "Lena, you're here, everyone." Everyone, she called out, her voice cutting through the polite murmur of the room. She glided over to me, and the entire room turned to look. "This is my wonderfully talented sister. Lena, she's the brilliant artisan I was telling you about. The one who is creating a special, hand-hewn archway just for Victoria and James." Just like that, I was on display, a spectacle. She put her arm around me, and I could feel dozens of pairs of eyes taking in my dusty work pants, my flannel shirt, my steel-toed boots. I was a curiosity, a piece of rustic decor that Megan had conjured up for their entertainment. She just came straight from her workshop. "As you can see," Megan continued, her voice full of a false, gushing pride. "She is so dedicated, so authentic. Isn't she just a treasure?" A wave of hot, suffocating humiliation washed over me. This was so much worse than I could have imagined. She hadn't just tricked me. She was parading me around like a court jester. She dragged me over to a group of older, impeccably dressed people who I immediately recognized from the society pages as the bride's parents, the Hendersons, the tech billionaire and his wife, Howard, Cynthia, Megan cooed. "This is my sister, Lena, the one I told you about. She's going to create that perfect, authentic touch for the entrance." Howard Henderson, a man with cold, calculating eyes, looked me up and down, a faint, amused smile on his lips. "An artisan," he said, the word sounding strange and foreign in his mouth. "Charming." His wife, Cynthia, gave me a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "It's so nice of you to help your sister out. Dear, it must be so difficult, working with your hands." The condescension was a physical thing, a thick, cloying smoke that filled my lungs. I just nodded, unable to speak, my rage a cold, hard ball in my stomach. Megan, her performance complete, steered me toward a small, empty table in the back. "There," she said. "You sit here, have a drink, mingle. I have to go deal with the caterer." And then she was gone, swallowed back up into her world of perfect veneers and important people. So I sat, alone, flannel-clad island in a sea of silk and cashmere. The string quartet played on. The guests laughed and chatted, and I, the ghost at the feast, just sat there. My professional mission to inspect the barn completely thwarted by the social nightmare I had been dropped into. I couldn't just get up and start tapping on support beams and shining my flashlight into the rafters. All I could do was watch. And what I saw made the cold knot of dread in my gut tighten. Megan, in her quest for aesthetic perfection, had hung massive, incredibly heavy crystal chandeliers from the central tie beams. The very beams I knew were already compromised. Huge, lush garlands of flowers and greenery were draped everywhere, adding hundreds, maybe thousands, of pounds of extra weight to the old, tired structure. It was a disaster waiting to happen. The dinner was served. I picked at a piece of salmon I didn't want. No one spoke to me. I was an anomaly. A piece of the set decoration that had been inexplicably given a seat at a table. And then, just as the dessert plates were being cleared. Megan stood up, a glass of champagne in her hand. She tapped it with a fork, the clear, ringing sound silencing the room. A warm, confident smile was on her face. It was time for a toast. "Good evening, everyone," she began, her voice full of warmth and professional grace. "For those of you who don't know me, I am Megan, and it has been the absolute honor of my life to plan this beautiful weekend for two of the most wonderful people I have ever met, Victoria and James." She went on for a few minutes, thanking the Hendersons, praising the happy couple. It was a perfect, polished performance. And you guys, what she did next, even after a lifetime of her casual cruelty, I still can't quite believe it. She turned the toast, her moment in the spotlight at the biggest event of her career, into a public execution. And I was the one at the gallows. She turned her smiling gaze toward my table in the back. "I am so lucky to have my own family here tonight to support me," she said. "My wonderful parents, and my big sister, Lena, is even here." She pointed me out with her champagne glass. Every head in the room turned to look at me. I felt like an animal pinned in a set of headlights. "We're so different, my sister and I," she continued, a little laugh in her voice. "While I was growing up, playing with dollhouses and planning imaginary weddings, my sister Lena was out in the garage, playing with her dad's power tools, while I was learning about floral arrangements and color palettes. My sister was learning about, well, sawdust, I guess." A wave of polite, amused laughter rippled through the room. My face was burning, but I kept my expression a perfect, frozen blank. "And we've continued on our different paths," she said, her smile widening. "I get to spend my life creating these beautiful, perfect moments of love and celebration." She gestured around the glittering, flower-filled barn. "And Lena, well, she spends her life in old, dirty buildings, playing with sawdust. But we love her for it, we do. It was a masterwork of cruelty, delivered with a loving smile. She was painting a picture for her wealthy, powerful clients, a picture of herself as the graceful, successful, and normal one, and of me as her strange, slightly pathetic, but lovable charity case of a sister. But she wasn't done. She saved the final, killing blow for last. "She is so dedicated to her craft," Megan said, her voice dropping into a tone of mock sympathy, "that she hardly has time for anything else. She's married to her work. As they say, I keep trying to set her up. But I guess it's hard to find a man who appreciates a woman who is handier with a hammer than he is." More laughter, louder this time. Now I wasn't just the weird, dirty sister. I was the lonely, unfeminine, and ultimately undateable spinster. "But I am so grateful she's here tonight," she said, raising her glass high. "Because she's a wonderful reminder for all of us, that while some of us are lucky enough to build beautiful memories, others build, well, barns. And we need those, too, to hold all our beautiful memories in." She smiled directly at me, to my big sister, "Lena, thank you for the foundation." The room applauded. They were applauding my own ritual humiliation. They thought it was a charming, funny, self-deprecating tribute. They didn't see the poison beneath the sugar, but I did. I did not cry. I did not scream. I did not run out of the room. I sat there, my spine as straight and as rigid as an iron rod. I let their applause wash over me. And in the cold, dead silence of my own heart, something broke. The last, fragile thread of sisterly love, of family obligation, of the desire to keep the peace. It just snapped. I looked at my sister, standing there in the spotlight, basking in the glow of her own casual cruelty. She had used me as a stepping stone. She had used my life as a punchline to make herself look better. And she had done it in front of the entire world. I picked up my water glass. I raised it, my hand perfectly steady. I looked my sister dead in the eye, and I gave her a small, tight smile of my own, a smile that didn't reach my eyes, a smile that was a promise. She had just made the biggest mistake of her life, and she had absolutely no idea. I sat at my table for a full 5 minutes after Megan's toast, my water glass held in a steady hand. The applause had died down, and the polite, meaningless chatter of the party had resumed its gentle roar. My sister was a supernova of social grace, moving from table to table, accepting congratulations for her witty, charming speech. No one was looking at me. I had served my purpose. I was the punchline, and the joke was over. I had been rendered invisible once again. And in that invisibility, I found my power. The hot, searing humiliation of a moment ago began to cool, crystallizing into something else. A cold, sharp, and intensely focused clarity. The emotional, wounded sister was being shoved aside by the professional, the historic restoration specialist, the woman who understood stress fractures and load-bearing capacities, and the slow, inexorable decay of beautiful, old things. Megan had humiliated me. She had used my life's work as a prop in her little drama, but in doing so, she had reminded me of what that work actually was. It was about seeing the truth beneath the pretty surface. It was about understanding that the most beautiful facades can hide the most dangerous weaknesses. And the Blackwood barn, for all its fairy lights and flowers, was a facade I knew, intimately, to be weak. I stood up, my movements quiet and deliberate. No one noticed. I slipped out of the main hall through a side door, leaving the warmth and the laughter behind, and stepped out into the cool, damp night. I told a passing waiter I was just getting some fresh air, but I wasn't there for fresh air. I was there to conduct an inspection, my own private, unsanctioned, and deeply necessary structural assessment. I started with the foundation, the place where all truths and all problems begin, my maglite, which I still had clipped to my belt, cut a sharp white circle on the old stonework. The developer had done a beautiful job with the landscaping, installing new bluestone patios and garden beds. It all looked perfect. It was perfect. If you didn't know what you were looking for, but I did, I walked to the north side of the barn, the side I remembered from my report years ago as having the most significant foundational issues, and my stomach clenched. The new, elegant patio had been graded improperly. It was a rookie mistake, a landscaper's error that a competent contractor should have caught. Instead of sloping gently away from the building, it was directing rainwater right back toward the base of the old stone wall. I could see the dark, damp stains on the mortar, the new hairline cracks that spiderwebbed out from the base. They were pulling water in, right into the foundation, weakening it with every single rainfall. I knelt down, my hand resting on the cold, damp stone. A building like this is a living thing. It settles, it shifts, it breathes for 200 years. This barn had known how to handle the seasons. It had known how to shed water. And these new owners, in their quest for a pretty patio, had fundamentally misunderstood it. They had interfered with its natural defenses. They had made it vulnerable. This was bad, but it wasn't the catastrophe. The foundation was a chronic condition, a slow-moving cancer. I was worried about the acute threat, the one that could cause a sudden, catastrophic failure. I was worried about the great beam. I walked the perimeter, my light scanning the massive, dark timbers of the walls. I needed to get into the attic space, the mow, the one place where I could get a clear, unobstructed view of the main structural frame. The main doors were full of guests. I needed another way in. I remembered from my original survey that there was an old loading door on the far side of the barn, a door that led into what used to be a grain silo but was now likely a storage area for the catering staff. I made my way around the back, my boots sinking slightly into the soft, damp ground. The door was there, hidden in the shadows. I tried the handle, locked, of course, but I'm a woman who knows her way around old buildings. I pulled a small, multi-tool from a pocket in my satchel. The lock was old, a simple latch mechanism. It took me less than 30 seconds. The soft click of the lock disengaging was a deeply satisfying sound. I slipped inside, closing the door silently behind me. I was in a dark, cavernous space that smelled of dust and cooking oil. It was, as I suspected, a staging area for the kitchen. Racks of dishes and stacks of chairs were lined up against the curved walls of the old silo. Through a doorway, I could see the bright, chaotic light of the main kitchen. I could hear the clatter of pots and the shouts of the chefs. But I wasn't interested in the kitchen. I was interested in what was above it. I saw what I was looking for: a narrow, steep set of wooden stairs, little more than a ladder, leading up into the darkness. The service stairs to the hayloft, the attic space. I moved silently, my soft-soled boots making no sound on the concrete floor. I climbed the stairs, my mag light held between my teeth. The air grew warmer, thick with the smell of ancient, dry wood. I emerged into a vast, dark space, a cathedral of timber. This was the true soul of the barn. The great soaring roof was a complex web of hand-hewn posts, rafters, and braces, all held together by wooden pegs. It was a masterpiece of pre-industrial engineering. The muffled sounds of the party below the music. The laughter were a faint, distant hum. Up here, it was quiet. The only sound was the faint, almost imperceptible creak of old wood under a strain it was never meant to bear. I directed my light upward, my beam cutting through the thick, dusty darkness. I found what I was looking for, the great central tie beam. It was a single, magnificent piece of old-growth oak, 2 feet thick and spanning the entire 60-foot width of the barn. Holding the 2 main walls together and supporting the weight of the roof, it was the keystone of the entire structure. And my sister, in her infinite aesthetic wisdom, had decided to hang 3 massive, antique crystal chandeliers from it. I moved closer, walking carefully along the wide plank floor of the loft. The chandeliers, each one weighing at least 500 or 600 pounds, were attached to the beam with new, brutally modern-looking steel eye bolts that had been drilled directly into the ancient wood. The sheer, concentrated weight was immense, and it was all focused on the dead center of the beam's span, its most vulnerable point. I shone my light on the point where the central, largest chandelier was attached, and what I saw made my blood run cold. There, radiating out from the steel bolt, were a series of new, tiny, hairline cracks in the surface of the old oak. They were almost invisible to the naked eye, the kind of detail that only a trained specialist, someone who knew the difference between a natural check in the wood and a fresh stress fracture, would ever notice. I reached out and laid my hand on the beam. I could feel it, a faint, low-frequency vibration, and I could hear it, a low, groaning, tortured sound, the sound of wood fibers tearing, one microscopic strand at a time, the sound of a beautiful, 200-year-old piece of timber screaming in slow motion. Now, let me explain something about old-growth timber. It's incredibly strong, much stronger than the new-growth wood we use today, but it's also brittle. It doesn't bend, it breaks. And when a beam of this size, under this much tension, finally fails, it doesn't just crack, it explodes. The combination of the compromised foundation, the immense, concentrated weight of the chandeliers, and the added dynamic load of the party, the vibrations from the music, from the movement of 100 people, was a textbook recipe for catastrophic structural failure. The rehearsal dinner was bad enough, but the wedding, the main event, would be worse. There would be more people. There would be a live band, with subwoofers vibrating through the floor. There would be dancing, hundreds of people dancing, their rhythmic movement creating a harmonic vibration that would resonate through the entire structure, putting even more stress on that single, failing beam. It wasn't a matter of if, it was a matter of when. I stood there in the dark, dusty attic, a cold sweat breaking out on my forehead. My sister's perfect, beautiful wedding venue was a death trap, and she was about to pack it with everyone she knew, including our own family. The professional in me, the woman who had written that report years ago, was screaming, "Sound the alarm, evacuate the building, shut it down." But the woman my sister had publicly humiliated an hour ago, the daughter who had been dismissed and mocked her entire life, was whispering something else. She didn't listen to you then. Why would she listen to you now? She called you a nobody. She said you play in the dirt. Let her perfect, beautiful world come crashing down around her. She deserves it. The two voices were at war inside me, my sense of professional duty versus the raw, bleeding wound of my personal pain. For a moment, a terrible, dark moment, the wounded daughter was winning. I thought about walking away. I thought about getting in my truck, driving home, and letting fate take its course. But then I thought about the Hendersons. I thought about the innocent guests. I thought about the catering staff in the kitchen below. I thought about my own mother and father, who, for all their faults, I did not want to see crushed under a falling chandelier. My personal feelings for my sister did not matter. My duty to protect human life did. It was the same principle that had guided me through my entire career. You don't get to pick and choose who you save. You just do your job. I took one last look at the cracked beam. My decision was made. I had to warn her. I had to try to stop this. I made my way back down the narrow stairs, my mind already formulating the calm, professional, and undeniable argument I would present to her. I would show her the evidence. I would explain the physics. I would make her understand the danger. I had to believe that her professional pride, her fear of a lawsuit, if not her concern for human life, would make her listen. I had to believe that my sister, for all her cruelty, was not a monster. I was about to find out just how wrong I was. I came down from the dusty, silent attic of the Blackwood barn, like a diver ascending from a deep, dangerous wreck. My ears were ringing with the silent scream of that compromised beam. My mind was a chaotic flood of engineering calculations, load-bearing capacities, and the horrifying, cinematic images of what a catastrophic structural failure in a room full of people would look like. The professional in me was on fire, a 5-alarm blaze of adrenaline and urgency. But as I slipped back into the main hall, the scene before me was so profoundly normal, so blissfully ignorant of the danger lurking just a few feet above their heads, that it gave me a strange sense of vertigo. The string quartet was still playing, the guests were still laughing, their faces glowing in the warm, flattering light of the very chandeliers that were threatening to kill them. My sister was the center of it all, a radiant sun of social perfection. I stood there for a moment, a ghost in the wings of their beautiful, doomed play, and I felt a wave of nausea. I had to tell her. I had to make her listen. Have you ever tried to help someone who is absolutely, positively determined to see you as the enemy? It's like trying to throw a life raft to a person who is convinced you're throwing a rock. Every attempt to help is seen as an attack. Every warning is interpreted as a threat. That was the conversation I was about to have with my sister. I needed to get her alone. I couldn't just walk up to her in the middle of her adoring crowd and announce that her perfect wedding venue was a death trap. She would see it as a public attack, and her defenses would go up so high. I'd never get through. I needed a quiet, private space where I could present the facts calmly and professionally. I waited, I watched. I faded back into my designated role as the invisible wallflower, nursing a fresh glass of club soda, my mind a whirlwind of strategic planning. I watched her work the room, her smile never faltering, her charm a weapon she wielded with practiced ease, and I saw, for the first time, the deep, desperate insecurity that fueled it all. Her perfection wasn't a state of being. It was a fortress she had built to protect herself from the terrifying possibility that she was, in fact, just as flawed and as fragile as everyone else. And I was about to walk up to her fortress and tell her there was a crack in the foundation. Finally, I saw my opportunity. She was giving some final instructions to the catering captain near a side door that led out onto a small, private patio. I intercepted her as she was turning to head back into the fray. "Megan," I said, my voice low and even. "I need to speak with you, urgently." She turned, and the professional smile she was wearing for the staff instantly vanished when she saw it was me. Her expression became one of weariness and irritation. "Lena, I am in the middle of the biggest night of my career. Whatever it is, can it wait?" "No," I said, my voice firm. "It can't. It's about the barn. It's important." Something in my tone, the absolute lack of my usual, accommodating softness, must have gotten through to her. With an exasperated sigh, she gestured toward the side door. "Fine, you have 2 minutes." We stepped out onto the cold, damp patio. The music and the laughter from inside faded to a muffled hum. The air was heavy with the smell of rain and wet earth. "Okay." "What is it?" she said, crossing her arms, her body language a wall of defensive impatience. "Did you decide my archway needs to be a different color? Because I swear, if you're about to add to my stress level right now—" "It's not about the archway," I said, keeping my voice as calm and as steady as I could. "It's about the building itself. Megan, this barn is not safe." She stared at me, her expression a perfect blank for a second. And then she let out a short, sharp, disbelieving laugh. Oh my God, is that what this is? You're joking, right? I have never been more serious in my life, I said. I pulled out my phone and showed her the pictures I had taken in the attic. I zoomed in on the hairline fractures radiating from the eye bolts on the main tie beam. Look, these are fresh stress fractures. The main beam is failing. The weight of the chandeliers you've hung, combined with the unstable foundation on the north side, is putting the entire roof structure under a catastrophic level of strain. I tried to explain the physics in the simplest terms possible. I talked about static loads and dynamic loads. I told her that the vibrations from the band and the dancing at the wedding tomorrow would amplify the stress exponentially. I'm not saying it might collapse, Megan, I said, my voice low and urgent. I am telling you that there is a very high probability that it will. You cannot have the wedding here tomorrow. You have to evacuate this dinner and call a structural engineer. Right now, I had presented the facts. I had shown her the evidence. I had laid out the danger in clear, undeniable terms. I had done my duty. She looked from the pictures on my phone back to my face. Her expression was no longer amused. It was something else entirely. It was a cold, hard, and utterly contemptuous fury. The insecurity I had glimpsed earlier was gone, replaced by the ironclad certainty of a narcissist under attack. You know what I think, she said, her voice a low, venomous hiss. I think you're pathetic. The word, so full of pure, unadulterated hatred, struck me with more force than a physical blow. You can't stand it, can you? She continued, taking a step closer, her eyes glittering with a strange, feverish light. You can't stand that I'm the successful one. You can't stand that this is my night, my triumph. You have been a bitter, jealous, little wallflower your entire life, and you just had to find a way to ruin this for me. This isn't about you, I said, my own voice finally rising. This is about the 200 people inside that barn who are in real, physical danger. Oh, spare me the noble act, she sneered. You think I'm an idiot? I had a team of licensed contractors and engineers sign off on this renovation. The place is perfectly safe. You're just making this up because you're jealous of me. Because Dad loves me more. Because I have a life, and a career, and a future, and all you have are your stupid, dirty little projects. Every word was a perfectly aimed dart, poisoned with a lifetime of sibling rivalry and resentment. You are just a failed carpenter who plays with sawdust, Lena, she spat, her face ugly with rage. What could you possibly know that a team of professional engineers doesn't? You are nothing. You are a nobody, and you are not going to ruin my wedding. She was so blinded by her own ego, by her lifelong narrative of my failure, that she was incapable of seeing the truth. My expertise, my knowledge, my very identity was a threat to her worldview, and so, her mind had chosen to reject it, to label it as a lie, as an act of jealous sabotage. I am trying to help you, you idiot, I finally yelled, my own control shattering. I am trying to prevent a catastrophe that will not only ruin your career, it could kill people. It could kill our own parents. Get out, she said, her voice dropping to a deadly, quiet whisper. You are done here. Finish the archway. Have it delivered tomorrow, and then you are to disappear. If I see your face at the wedding tomorrow, I will have security remove you. Do you understand me? I looked at her, at my sister, her face twisted into a mask of pure, irrational hatred. And I finally saw her. I saw the deep, dark, and terrifying emptiness at her core, the emptiness that she tried to fill with perfect parties, and praise, and the public humiliation of her own sister. And I knew that there was nothing more I could do. I had offered her the lifeline, and she had not just refused it. She had tried to use it to strangle me. My anger, my hurt, my fear, it all vanished, replaced by a profound and chilling sense of finality. I had done my duty. I had delivered the warning. My conscience was clear. Okay, Megan, I said, and my voice was as calm and as quiet as the grave. I understand perfectly. I looked at her one last time. You've made your choice. The building is unsafe. The lives of your guests and your own reputation are now your responsibility and yours alone. Don't say you weren't warned. I turned and walked away. I didn't look back. I walked past the beautiful, glittering party, past the string quartet, past the smiling, oblivious guests. I walked out the front door, got in my truck, and started the engine. As I drove away from the Blackwood barn, from the warm, inviting lights that I knew were a lie, from the sister I had just lost forever, I wasn't angry anymore. I was just profoundly, deeply, and chillingly sad, because I had just seen the future, and it was going to be a disaster of her own making. The morning of the wedding was beautiful. The sky was a crisp, clear, and painfully indifferent blue. I spent the morning in my workshop, putting the finishing touches on the rustic archway my sister had demanded. I had worked on it all night, my hands moving with a practiced, automatic skill, my mind a million miles away. I am a professional. When I take on a job, I see it through to the end. The archway was a masterpiece. I had used reclaimed Douglas fir from an old bridge, the wood rich with history and character. The joints were perfect mortise and tenons, held together with hand-carved locust pegs. It was strong, it was authentic, it was, in short, a piece of work I was deeply proud of. It was a perfect metaphor for everything my sister and my family refused to see in me: the substance, the strength, the hidden, quiet beauty. At 11 a.m., as instructed, I had 2 of my younger crew members load it onto a truck for delivery. "You're not going with it," Lena, my foreman, a good man named Carlos, asked. "No," I said, looking out the workshop window in the direction of the Blackwood barn. "My work here is done. They have everything they need. I had fulfilled my contract. I had honored my professional obligation. And I had honored my sister's final, venomous command. I had disappeared." The rest of the day was a long, slow, agonizing wait. I tried to work. I tried to clean my workshop. I tried to read, but I couldn't focus. My mind was at the barn. I could see it all in my head: the guests arriving in their expensive clothes, the string quartet playing, my sister Megan, a radiant, triumphant queen, overseeing her perfect creation, and I could feel, in my bones, the silent, groaning protest of that great oak beam, a silent scream that only I could hear. I was not hoping for a disaster. Let me be absolutely clear about that. Hoping for a disaster is a luxury for people who have never seen one up close. I have stood in the wreckage of collapsed buildings. I know the smell of dust and fear. I was not hoping for a catastrophe. I was simply a professional who had made an assessment, and I was waiting for the data to prove me right. And then, at 4:15 p.m., just as the ceremony was scheduled to begin, my phone started to blow up. It wasn't a call from my sister or my mother. It was a news alert from the local paper's app. The headline was stark and terrifying: "Structural incident at high-profile wedding at Blackwood barn. Emergency crews en route." My blood ran cold. It had happened. My phone immediately began to ring. It was my mother. I answered, my hand shaking. "Lena," she shrieked, her voice a raw, panicked sound. "Oh my God, Lena, you were right, the roof, Mom. Are you okay?" I cut her off, my voice shifting instantly into the calm, authoritative tone I use in a crisis. "Is everyone okay? Are you hurt?" "We're okay, I think," she sobbed. "We're outside, but the inside, oh God, it was horrible. The chandeliers, they fell. And the noise? Lena, you have to get here." "I'm on my way," I said, already grabbing my keys and my heavy-duty mag light. I hung up and sprinted to my truck. The drive to the barn was a surreal nightmare. I could hear the sirens long before I saw the flashing lights. When I got close, the road was blocked by a line of police cars, fire engines, and ambulances. I pulled onto the shoulder, threw my truck in park, and ran the last quarter mile. The scene was one of controlled chaos. Elegantly dressed wedding guests were wandering around the manicured lawns in a daze, the women's high heels sinking into the soft grass. Paramedics were treating a few people for minor cuts and bruises. But thank God, it did not look like a mass casualty event. And then I saw the barn. It was not a full pancake collapse, which was the mercy I had been praying for, but it was a catastrophe nonetheless. The great central tie beam, the one I had warned my sister about, had not broken completely in half. It had cracked, violently, in the middle. It was now sagging into the center of the room in a deep, terrifying V-shape. The 3 massive crystal chandeliers had torn free from their mountings and had plummeted to the floor, exploding into a million glittering shards of glass. They had crashed down directly onto the main aisle, right where the bride would have been walking just minutes later. A portion of the attic floor had come down with them, showering the elegant dinner tables with a cascade of splintered wood, dust, and insulation. The building was a wreck, a beautiful, glittering, and utterly ruined wreck. I found my family huddled together near a catering tent, wrapped in emergency blankets. My mother was weeping hysterically. My father was standing beside her, his face ashen, looking 100 years old. They were safe. The relief was so profound. It made me weak in the knees. And then I saw Megan. She was sitting on the bumper of an ambulance, a paramedic trying to talk to her. She was covered in a fine layer of white dust, her perfect hair a mess, her expensive dress torn at the shoulder. She was just staring at the ruined barn, her face a blank, catatonic mask of pure, unadulterated horror. Her perfect day, her perfect wedding, the biggest event of her career. It had all, quite literally, come crashing down around her. Her eyes, which had been blank, finally focused, and they found me. Our gazes locked from across the chaotic lawn. And in that moment, there was no anger, there were no accusations. There was just a terrible, silent, and mutual understanding. She saw in my eyes not triumph, not a smug "I told you so," but the deep, sorrowful confirmation of a truth she had refused to hear. And I saw in hers the shattering, soul-crushing agony of a woman who had just realized that her own pride, her own arrogance, her own cruel dismissal of the one person who could have saved her, was the sole and absolute cause of her own ruin. The humiliation she had dealt me at the rehearsal dinner was a fleeting, social embarrassment. The humiliation she was experiencing now was a public, professional, and catastrophic failure that would follow her for the rest of her life. She had made her bed, and now, the roof had caved in on it. I broke eye contact first and turned my attention to the situation at hand. The professional in me took over. I saw the fire chief, a man I knew named Bill, and I walked over to him. "Chief," I said, "it's Lena Torres." He turned, his face grim. "Lena. Jesus, I heard your sister was the planner. Thank God it looks like we avoided any serious injuries." "What's the status of the building?" I asked. "Unstable as hell," he said, looking at the sagging roofline. "I'm not sending anyone else inside until we get a structural engineer out here to assess it. We don't know if that main beam is going to hold, for all we know. The whole damn roof could come down." "I've seen the original plans," I said quietly. "And I did a private structural assessment of this building about 5 years ago for the Historical Society." The chief's head whipped around to look at me, his eyes wide. "You're kidding me." "No," I said. "I have a copy of my report in my truck. It details the vulnerabilities in that central tie beam and the foundation. The developer who did the renovation never addressed them. He just covered them up." The chief stared at me, then at the barn, then back at me, a new, dawning respect in his eyes. "Get it," he said, his voice a low, urgent command. "I need to see it, now." I turned to go back to my truck. As I did, I passed my sister again. She was still sitting on the bumper of the ambulance, but she was watching me now, her eyes following my every move. She had seen me talking to the fire chief. She had seen the look on his face. She had seen him give me an order I was moving to obey, in the middle of her own personal, professional, and emotional ground zero. In the wreckage of her perfect world, she was watching her failed sister, the glorified construction worker, the woman who played in the dirt, suddenly become the most important, most competent, and most essential person on the scene. The look on her face was not anger anymore. It wasn't hatred. It was a look of pure, agonizing, and soul-crushing regret. And that, I realized, was a punishment far more profound than any revenge I could have ever dreamed of. In the chaotic aftermath of the collapse, a strange, new order began to emerge. The first responders, the firefighters, the paramedics, the police created a perimeter, their flashing lights cutting through the gathering dusk. And inside that perimeter, a new hierarchy was established, one that had nothing to do with wealth or social status, and everything to do with competence. I handed my old dog-eared report on the Blackwood barn to the fire chief, and as he and a team of structural engineers scanned my detailed 5-year-old warnings, I watched the looks on their faces change from professional concern to a kind of grim, furious respect. I was no longer my sister's weird, out-of-place sibling. I was an expert witness. I was the one person on the scene who had the truth. They asked me questions. They had me point out the unstable foundation on the building plans. They had me explain the physics of the stress fractures on the main tie beam. I spoke in the calm, precise, and technical language of my profession, and from a distance, huddled with my shell-shocked parents. My sister Megan watched me. She watched as these uniformed, important men listened to me with a deference and respect that no one in our family had ever shown me. She watched as the failed carpenter became the most essential person in the middle of her own catastrophe. The hours that followed were a blur of official business. I gave a formal statement to the fire marshal. I spoke with the county building inspector. I did my duty. My family was eventually escorted back to their hotel. I didn't speak to them. There was nothing to say. The sight of the ruined barn, of the panicked guests, of my own quiet competence in the face of the disaster, had said it all. The fallout from the Henderson wedding disaster, as the local news dubbed it, was immediate and brutal, and it all landed on my sister. Her reputation as the city's premier wedding planner, a reputation built on a flawless, perfect image, was not just tarnished, it was obliterated. The Hendersons, the billionaire clients, were suing her for negligence and breach of contract. The owner of the Blackwood barn, trying to deflect blame, was suing her for the unauthorized and dangerous additions of the heavy chandeliers, and her insurance company, citing the gross negligence of ignoring the building's obvious structural flaws, was refusing to pay out a single dime. Megan was ruined, not just professionally, but financially. She was facing a mountain of legal fees and a series of lawsuits that would likely bankrupt her. The perfect, glittering world she had built for herself had collapsed as surely as the roof of that barn. She didn't call me for 3 weeks. I heard about her downfall through my mother, whose frantic, weeping phone calls I would listen to with a kind of detached, sorrowful sympathy. Her business is gone. Lena, my mother, would cry. Her clients have all left her. She won't even get out of bed. You have to do something. I've already done everything I can, Mom, I would reply calmly. But you were right, she would insist. Your report, the one you wrote years ago, that's the proof that it wasn't Megan's fault. It was that developer who cut corners. You have to give it to her lawyers. You have to help her. Megan knows where to find me, was all I would say. I knew she would call eventually, because she was desperate, and because, for all her pride, she was a survivor. The call came on a Tuesday morning. I was in my workshop, planing a piece of beautiful, reclaimed cypress. The rhythmic whisper of the blade, a peaceful counterpoint to the turmoil of the past few weeks. Lena, her voice was small, fragile, and utterly devoid of its usual, arrogant confidence. It was the voice of a stranger. "Hello, Megan," I said. I need to see you," she whispered. "I need to ask you for your help." "Okay," I said, "my workshop, tomorrow at 10. I didn't offer to come to her. I didn't offer to meet at a neutral coffee shop. The meeting would be on my turf, in my world, in my place of power. She arrived the next morning, looking like a ghost. The designer clothes were gone, replaced by simple jeans and a sweater. Her perfect hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail. The mask of perfection had been completely stripped away, and the woman underneath looked small and lost and terrified. She stood in the middle of my workshop, looking at the tools, the massive, half-finished projects, the stacks of beautiful, ancient wood. She was looking at my real life for the very first time. "You have to help me, Lena," she began, her voice cracking. "The lawyers, the insurance company, they're saying it's all my fault. They're saying I was negligent, but you know the truth. You know that building was a death trap before I ever touched it. Your report, the one from years ago, it's the only thing that can save me. Please, as your sister, I'm begging you." She stood there, my brilliant, successful, and cruel sister, and she begged. She had been brought to her knees by the consequences of her own actions. And I felt nothing, not pity, not satisfaction, just a quiet, calm, and profound sense of finality. I walked over to my main workbench, a massive 12-foot-long slab of solid maple that I had built with my own hands. I picked up a file folder that was sitting there, and I slid it across the smooth, oiled surface of the wood toward her. "This is my help," I said. She looked at me, confused, and opened the folder. Inside was not my old report. It was a single, simple, and legally binding document, my standard professional services contract. She stared at it, her brow furrowed in confusion. What is this?" "That is a contract for my services as an expert consultant and witness," I said, my voice calm and professional. "It details my fee schedule, my retainer, and the terms of my engagement. My rate is $500 an hour, with a $10,000 retainer, payable in advance. If you and your lawyers wish to hire me to provide my professional expertise, my original report, and my sworn testimony in your legal defense, you will sign that contract, and your lawyer will wire the retainer to my business account. Those are my terms." She looked up from the contract, her eyes wide with a new, dawning horror. This was a look that went beyond the shock she had felt at the wedding. This was a look of profound, soul-crushing comprehension. She was finally, truly, understanding. You want me to pay you," she whispered, as if the concept was too monstrous to comprehend. "Of course," I said with a small professional smile. "You are asking for my time, my knowledge, and my professional reputation, my expertise. The expertise you and our family have dismissed and ridiculed for my entire adult life. Turns out to be quite valuable. That's the price." She just stared at me, the contract trembling in her hands, and I knew, in that moment, that this was the real revenge. It wasn't the collapse of the barn. It wasn't her public humiliation. It was this quiet, professional, and transactional moment. The moment where I forced her to acknowledge my worth, not with a tearful apology, but with a check. The moment I made her put a dollar amount on the value of the sister she had called a failure. "I thought," she stammered, "I thought, after everything, that you would just help me because I'm your sister." "You were the one who showed me that's not how our family works." "Megan," I said, my voice losing its professional tone and becoming something more personal, more real. "You taught me that our relationship is a transaction. You needed a punchline for your toast, so you used me. Now, you need an expert witness, so you're trying to use me again. The only difference is, this time, I'm setting the price." I let that sink in. I let her stand there in the middle of my world, the world of real things, of tangible skills, and I let her understand the new terms of our relationship. I didn't hate her. I didn't even want to see her completely destroyed. But I needed her to learn the lesson that the universe had tried to teach her. Actions have consequences. And my help, my forgiveness, my expertise, it was no longer free. She stood there for a long time, and then, with a shaking hand, she reached into her purse, took out a pen, and she signed the contract. That was the moment I made her regret it, not by wishing for her downfall, but by being the only person who could stop it, and by making her finally, formally, and financially acknowledge the value of the sister she had tried so hard to destroy. My work wasn't a hobby. It was her salvation, and it had a price.